Every moment you wait is an opportunity slipping away, time you can never get back. Why do you let hesitation steal your dreams? Procrastination isn't just a delay, it's a thief robbing you of your potential. But you can break free. How? By mastering decisive action one step at a time. Imagine the power of finishing what you start, the momentum of progress fueling your success. Will you keep watching time slip by, or claim your destiny right now? In a few moments, you'll discover the secret to defeating procrastination once and for all. Learn how to break free from hesitation. Take decisive action and transform your life with unstoppable momentum. How procrastination steals more than just time. Procrastination is not just a thief of time, it is the silent assassin of dreams, the invisible hand that steals your ambition and shackles you to mediocrity. You tell yourself that tomorrow will be the day, that next week things will change, but you know deep down that time waits for no one. But why does procrastination have such a firm grip on your life? It's because it's easy, it's comfortable. The mind craves safety, and nothing is safer than standing still. But comfort is the enemy of progress. Every moment you delay, you are silently choosing comfort over growth, and that choice adds up day by day, until years have slipped by and the life you wanted is nothing more than a distant echo of what could have been. But there is a way out. You must first understand that procrastination is a mindset. It is a mental habit that can be broken with consistent action. Start with one task you've been avoiding. Write it down, look at it, and do it now. Not tomorrow, not later, right now. Action is the only cure for delay. Action is the only weapon that can slay the beast of procrastination. Think back to the life of Samuel Insull, the British-born American businessman who was instrumental in creating an electricity grid for the United States. Born in 1859, Insull moved to America to work for Thomas Edison and built an empire through sheer action and relentless focus. Insull understood that time was his greatest asset, and he wielded it with precision. His empire was not built on dreams, it was built on action. But now, I ask you, how much longer will you wait? How many dreams will you sacrifice to the hands of procrastination? If not now, then when? If not you, then who? Why, every moment matters more than you think. Time slips through our fingers like invisible sand. Unlike money, which we count and save with careful attention, time vanishes without a tangible trace. Yet this currency, the seconds, minutes, and hours of our lives, holds value beyond any material wealth we might accumulate. Every moment that passes is irretrievable. While we can earn more money, recover from failures, and rebuild what's broken, we cannot reclaim a single second once it's gone. This simple truth should transform how we approach each day. Yet most of us live as though time were infinite. Andrew Carnegie, born into poverty in 1835, the Scottish immigrant understood time's true value from an early age. While others squandered hours, Carnegie invested each moment toward building his future. By 30, he had already established himself as a formidable force in the steel industry. His extraordinary rise from penniless immigrant to one of America's wealthiest men wasn't merely the product of talent or circumstance. It was the compound interest on his time investments. Carnegie recognized what most fail to see. Time is the great equalizer. Each person, regardless of wealth or status, receives the same 24 hours daily. The difference lies in how we utilize this universal allocation. Those who achieve remarkable success aren't given extra hours, they simply extract maximum value from each moment they possess. How might your life transform if you treated each hour as precious? Imagine approaching every day as though it were your final opportunity to advance toward your dreams. Procrastination loses its seductive power when you truly grasp that the clock isn't merely measuring your day, it's counting down your life. The most profound time wisdom comes from understanding that life isn't measured in years, but in moments of presence. A single hour of focused work, genuine connection, or creative flow often contributes more to our legacy than days of distracted existence. Every moment matters, because collectively, these moments are your life. How will you spend the currency of your remaining hours? Why? It's the greatest lie you tell yourself, the most dangerous deception. Isn't the one others tell you? It's the one you whisper to yourself each time you delay action. Procrastination doesn't arrive with warning signs. Instead, it seduces you with comforting rationalizations that feel like wisdom but function as poison. I'll start tomorrow. I need more information before beginning. I work better under pressure. The timing isn't quite right. These statements sound reasonable, even responsible, yet they represent the sophisticated architecture of self-sabotage that prevents achievement long before external obstacles appear. This internal deception system operates with remarkable efficiency because it targets your vulnerabilities. It knows precisely when to offer relief from discomfort, when to suggest that waiting is prudent rather than paralyzing, and when to convince you that hesitation is actually preparation. James J. Hill, the visionary who transformed America's Northwest through sheer determination. Born in 1838, Hill didn't wait for perfect economic conditions or government backing to pursue his railway ambitions. While competitors sought federal subsidies and optimal circumstances, Hill moved forward, constructing the Great Northern Railway through challenging terrain when conventional wisdom counseled patience. Hill understood a fundamental truth. Waiting is rarely about preparation. It's about fear disguised as prudence. He recognized that someday is where dreams go to expire quietly, without the discomfort of failure, but also without the possibility of triumph. What separates those who achieve from those who merely aspire isn't talent or luck. It's their relationship with time and discomfort. Achievement requires confronting the uncomfortable reality that beginning is always harder than planning to begin. The moment of initiation brings resistance, uncertainty, and the possibility of inadequacy into sharp focus. To break free from procrastination's hypnotic grip, you must first identify its specific language in your life. What particular lies does it tell you? Which excuses have you elevated to the status of legitimate reasons? The procrastination that plagues a perfectionist differs from that affecting someone fearing failure, yet both function with equal destructiveness. Try this experiment. Write down every reason you haven't started your most important project. Then question each one mercilessly. Is it really true that you need more information? Or is information gathering simply a comfortable substitute for action? Do you genuinely work better under pressure? Or have you simply never experienced the power of methodical progress without artificial urgency? Your answers will reveal the intricate web of self-deception that has become so familiar you no longer recognize it as fiction. The remedy begins with radical honesty. Acknowledge that procrastination isn't a work style or personality trait. It's a protection mechanism against discomfort. Once recognized, you can implement strategic countermeasures, breaking tasks into smaller components, creating immediate consequences for inaction, or establishing accountability structures that override internal resistance. The answers might terrify you, which means they're probably true. How procrastination drains your wealth and success. The ledger of your life contains two columns: what you've accomplished and what you've postponed. While we meticulously track our financial accounts, few of us calculate the staggering cost of delay, the invisible tax we pay when opportunity passes while we remain in preparation mode. Procrastination extracts its toll not in dramatic, obvious ways, but through the quiet accumulation of unrealized potential. Consider the investment account never opened, the business idea never launched, the skill never developed, the connection never made. Each represents not merely a missed opportunity, but compound interest forever lost. When you delay action by just one day, you sacrifice more than 24 hours. You forfeit the momentum, learning, and progress that would have generated exponential returns. This mathematics of missed opportunity rarely appears in financial statements, yet it determines the ultimate balance of your success account more decisively than any other factor. Jay Gould, the controversial yet undeniably successful railroad magnate born in 1836, understood this principle intuitively. Despite humble beginnings, Gould recognized that hesitation was a luxury he couldn't afford. While others analyzed market conditions endlessly, Gould moved decisively, identifying opportunities in the railroad industry that others overlooked or were too cautious to pursue. His approach wasn't reckless, it was pragmatic. He understood that perfect information and ideal conditions are theoretical concepts that rarely materialize in the real world. By the time consensus emerges about an opportunity's viability, its highest return period has typically passed. Gould's fortune, among the largest of America's Gilded Age, wasn't built through superior resources, but through superior timing and the courage to act while others deliberated. The wealth-draining power of procrastination operates through three primary mechanisms. Breaking procrastination's wealth-draining cycle begins with recognizing that action itself is a form of capital, one that generates returns through experience, feedback, and momentum. Even imperfect action creates value through learning, while perfect plans without implementation remain perpetually worthless. Track your delay cost by estimating the value lost through postponed decisions. What would that business idea have generated if launched last year? What salary increase would that certification have created if completed 6 months ago? These calculations create powerful motivation by making procrastination's price tag visible. How to conquer procrastination with the power of decision. Procrastination dissolves the moment you make a genuine decision, not the half commitments we often mistake for decisions. I'll try, or I hope to, or I plan on, but the irrevocable kind that eliminates all other options and makes retreat impossible. True decision possesses a finality that transforms your relationship with action. The word itself reveals this power. Decision comes from the Latin decidere, meaning to cut off. When you decide, you sever alternative paths, channeling all your energy in one direction, rather than dispersing it across many possibilities. This concentrated focus explains why decisive people accomplish what others merely contemplate. They aren't necessarily more talented or resourceful. They've simply reduced the internal friction that paralyzes most of us between contemplation and action. Herbert Hoover exemplified this decisive approach long before becoming America's 31st president. Born in 1874 and orphaned at 9, Hoover could have easily surrendered to circumstance. Instead, he made uncompromising decisions that propelled him forward. As a mining engineer, he transformed failing operations into profitable ventures through swift, clear-minded choices when others hesitated. During World War I, Hoover's decisive leadership saved millions from starvation through the Commission for Relief in Belgium. When conventional wisdom suggested waiting for better conditions or more resources, Hoover created solutions through immediate action, orchestrating complex food delivery systems across war-torn regions when others saw only insurmountable obstacles. Hoover understood what psychology now confirms. Decisiveness creates its own momentum. Each decision strengthens your decision-making muscle, while indecision atrophies it. The more you practice decisive action, the more naturally it comes, and the less power procrastination holds over you. To harness this transformative power, begin with decision clarity. Vague intentions breed hesitation, while specific commitments demand action. Replace "I should exercise more" with "I will walk for 30 minutes every morning at 7:00 a.m. starting tomorrow." The specificity creates accountability and eliminates the decision fatigue that fuels procrastination. Next, create decision consequences. When Cortez burned his ships upon reaching the New World, he eliminated retreat as an option for his men. Similarly, you can create conditions where following through becomes easier than backing out. Paying for annual gym memberships, announcing goals publicly, or establishing accountability partnerships. Perhaps most importantly, practice decisiveness in small matters to build capacity for larger ones. Decision-making is a skill that strengthens with use. Begin with minor choices: what to wear, where to eat, which task to tackle first, making them quickly without second-guessing. This builds the neural pathways that make decisive action your default response. When procrastination tempts you, remember, indecision is a decision. The decision to remain exactly where you are. Every moment spent in hesitation is a vote for the status quo and against your potential. The transformation of willpower. Willpower isn't a trait bestowed at birth, but a capacity developed through deliberate practice. The misconception that some people naturally possess extraordinary self-discipline, while others don't, has prevented countless individuals from developing this crucial ability. This fixed mindset becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Believing willpower is unchangeable guarantees it remains undeveloped. Science confirms what history's achievers have always demonstrated. Willpower functions like a muscle, strengthening with use and atrophying with neglect. Neurologically, each act of self-discipline reinforces neural pathways, making subsequent acts of discipline progressively easier. What initially requires enormous effort eventually becomes second nature through this biological transformation. George Westinghouse embodied this progressive strengthening of willpower throughout his remarkable career. Born in 1846, Westinghouse began developing his discipline in his father's agricultural machinery shop before serving in the Civil War. Each challenge he overcame, from creating a safer railroad braking system to revolutionizing the electrical industry, built upon previously developed reserves of determination. When Westinghouse championed alternating current, AC, against Thomas Edison's direct current, DC, he faced not merely technical challenges, but a powerful opponent willing to electrocute animals publicly to discredit AC power. Lesser individuals would have abandoned the fight, but Westinghouse's previously strengthened willpower allowed him to persist through this war of currents, despite financial strain and public relations attack. His ultimate triumph wasn't merely technological. It represented the culmination of willpower consistently applied across decades. The electrical system powering our modern world exists largely because one man's disciplined persistence outlasted another's opposition. The transformation of your own willpower begins with understanding its progressive nature. Start with challenges slightly beyond your current capacity, difficult enough to require effort, but achievable enough to build confidence. The specific domain matters less than the consistent practice of choosing long-term benefits over immediate gratification. Begin each morning with a small act of discipline, perhaps making your bed, completing a brief workout, or spending 15 minutes on your most important project before checking messages. These seemingly insignificant actions create momentum that carries into larger challenges throughout the day. Track your willpower wins, however modest. The visible record of your growing discipline becomes powerful motivation during inevitable periods of resistance. Remember that willpower depletion is temporary. Research shows that simply believing your willpower is unlimited significantly increases your capacity for sustained effort. Strategic rest enhances willpower rather than diminishing it. Schedule brief recovery periods between demanding tasks, as elite athletes do between training sessions. This prevents the burnout that often masquerades as permanent willpower failure. Perhaps most importantly, connect your discipline to deeper meaning. Westinghouse didn't merely sell electrical systems. He envisioned transforming human potential through accessible energy. When willpower serves something larger than momentary comfort, its capacity expands exponentially. How procrastination masquerades as safety. Procrastination's most dangerous disguise is its appearance as prudent caution. It whispers seductively that delay is wise, that by postponing action, you're gathering information, mitigating risks, and protecting yourself from potential failure. This deception transforms procrastination from acknowledged weakness into perceived virtue. The safety procrastination promises is entirely illusory. Rather than protecting you from danger, it guarantees harm through opportunity loss, skill stagnation, and the accumulation of unfulfilled potential. The comfort it offers is temporary and ultimately hollow, much like an anesthetic that removes the pain while the underlying condition worsens. William Mulholland's transformation of Los Angeles through water infrastructure illustrates the false security of procrastination. Born in 1855, Mulholland rose from ditch digger to self-taught engineer through persistent action when others hesitated. When Los Angeles faced devastating water shortages in the early 1900s, Mulholland envisioned and executed the 233-mile Los Angeles Aqueduct, a project of unprecedented scale that many experts deemed impossible. Had Mulholland yielded to the safety procrastination promised, waiting for perfect conditions, complete information, or universal approval, Los Angeles would never have developed into the metropolis it became. Instead, he recognized that the greater risk lay not in action, but in delay. While caution dictated that a self-educated engineer should never attempt such an ambitious project, Mulholland understood that genuine safety came through addressing the city's water crisis directly, not avoiding the challenge. The safety illusion thrives on cognitive distortions that feel rational in the moment. When we postpone difficult conversations, challenging projects, or significant changes, we tell ourselves we're being prudent, preparing more thoroughly, or waiting for better timing. The mind rarely acknowledges the greater dangers of continued inaction. Breaking procrastination's false safety spell requires recognizing its distinctive language. Phrases like, "I just need to do more research," "I'm not quite ready yet," or "the timing isn't optimal," often mask fear rather than indicate genuine preparation. Test each delay justification by asking, "Would I give this same advice to someone I care about?" The answer often reveals procrastination's deception. The antidote begins with reframing action as the true safety mechanism. Starting imperfectly creates feedback that guides improvement, while perfectionist delay prevents the very learning needed for success. Ironically, those who act despite feeling unprepared typically achieve confidence faster than those who wait until they feel fully ready. Ask yourself honestly, what opportunity costs am I bearing in exchange for the illusion of safety? What skills remain undeveloped, relationships unformed, or contributions unmade because I've confused comfort with security? The most dangerous risk isn't failure, it's the slow decay of potential through persistent delay. True safety comes not from avoiding challenges, but from developing the capacity to meet them effectively. Like Mulholland, who transformed a city through water when others saw only insurmountable obstacles, your greatest security lies in action that procrastination disguised as safety would prevent. Why starting small is the secret to big achievements. Monumental achievements rarely begin with monumental actions. Instead, they emerge from humble beginnings, small, unremarkable steps that, viewed individually, appear insignificant. This counterintuitive truth explains why many never achieve their ambitions. They wait for the dramatic opportunity rather than embracing the power of modest beginnings. The psychology behind this reluctance is revealing. The gap between current reality and ambitious goals creates cognitive dissonance that triggers procrastination. Our minds prefer the comfort of planning grand ventures someday over taking small, imperfect actions today. We tell ourselves we'll start when conditions improve, when we have more resources, when we feel more confident, effectively surrendering our progress to circumstances beyond our control. Edwin C. Barnes's journey illustrates the transformative power of starting small, without guarantees. Born in 1870 with no connections, money, or special advantages, Barnes set his sights on partnering with Thomas Edison, America's premier inventor. Instead of waiting until he had impressive credentials, Barnes simply showed up at Edison's laboratory. His first position was menial, far from the partnership he envisioned. Many would have found this humbling beginning beneath them, but Barnes recognized it for what it was, not his destination, but his entry point. From this modest position, he demonstrated exceptional work ethic, absorbed everything about Edison's business, and gradually made himself indispensable. Eventually, Barnes became Edison's exclusive marketer for the Ed-iPhone dictation machine, transforming both men's fortunes. His success didn't come from starting big, it came from starting at all, and then building methodically from that foundation. The science behind starting small is compelling. Research on habit formation shows that tiny actions bypass the brain's resistance mechanisms. When we commit to actions so small they seem almost trivial, reading one page instead of a chapter, doing one push-up instead of 20, writing one paragraph instead of an essay, we eliminate the psychological barriers that prevent initiation. These micro-commitments create momentum that naturally expands over time. The writer who commits to one sentence often completes a paragraph. The entrepreneur who makes one sales call frequently continues to the second and third. Starting small doesn't mean staying small. It means creating the initial movement that overcomes inertia. This approach also accelerates learning through rapid feedback cycles. When you take small actions daily rather than major actions occasionally, you gather more data points about what works. Each minor step becomes a learning opportunity that refines your approach, gradually increasing your efficiency and effectiveness. To implement this principle, identify the smallest possible action that moves you toward your goal. For a business, it might be making one sales call daily. The action should be so modest that it feels almost impossible to refuse. Then establish triggers that automatically initiate these actions. A specific time, location, or preceding action that signals it's time to begin. This environmental design removes the need for willpower and decision-making, further reducing resistance. Track your small actions visually, creating a chain of consistency that becomes increasingly difficult to break. This visible progress provides immediate psychological reinforcement, even when tangible results remain distant. How consistency turns time into an ally. Time moves with perfect democracy, distributing exactly 24 hours daily to every living person, regardless of wealth, status, or ambition. Yet some transform these identical hours into extraordinary achievement, while others find the same allotment inadequate for even modest progress. The difference isn't time itself, but how consistently it's harnessed. Consistency transforms time from a neutral force into a powerful multiplier through a mechanism as reliable as compound interest. Just as money grows exponentially when interest generates further interest, consistent actions create results that themselves produce accelerating returns. This compounding effect explains why achievements often appear to materialize suddenly after long periods of apparent stagnation. Few understood this principle better than Hetty Green, the remarkable financier born in 1834, who became America's wealthiest woman despite operating in the male-dominated world of 19th century finance. Nicknamed the Witch of Wall Street for her austere habits and unconventional approaches, Green built her fortune not through spectacular single investments, but through the relentless application of sound principles across decades. While contemporary financiers chased dramatic market plays and speculative opportunities, Green maintained unwavering consistency. She invested methodically during market downturns when others panicked. She conducted thorough research when others relied on rumors. She maintained cash reserves when others overextended. None of these actions appeared remarkable in isolation, but their consistency across 50 years transformed modest wealth into a fortune exceeding $100 million. 0 cents. Green's success reveals consistency's hidden power. It doesn't merely accumulate results, it fundamentally alters possibility. Her steady approach meant she had capital available during panics, when assets were undervalued, creating opportunities inaccessible to less consistent investors. Her reliability made her a preferred lender when credit markets froze. Consistency didn't just build her wealth, it created unique advantages unavailable to erratic competitors. The neurological basis for consistency's effectiveness lies in how it reshapes brain architecture. Repeated actions establish neural pathways that become increasingly efficient with use. What initially requires conscious effort gradually becomes automatic, dramatically reducing the energy required for continued performance. This explains why those who maintain consistent habits eventually find them easier than inconsistency. Their brains have literally restructured to facilitate these patterns. Harnessing consistency requires understanding its paradoxical nature. While consistency's rewards are extraordinary, the actions producing them appear ordinary, often disappointing those seeking immediate validation. This mismatch between unremarkable daily inputs and remarkable long-term outputs creates a motivational challenge that derails most consistency attempts. Overcome this by implementing commitment devices that maintain consistency regardless of motivation fluctuations. These might include accountability partners, habit tracking systems, environmental design changes, or identity-based commitments that frame consistency as an expression of who you are rather than what you do. Equally important is selecting consistency targets wisely. The compounding power works identically for positive and negative patterns. Consistent learning compounds into expertise. Consistent complaining compounds into chronic negativity. Choose carefully what you repeat, recognizing that consistency amplifies whatever it touches. Start with a single daily action so modest that maintaining it feels almost trivially easy. This minimum viable consistency creates the foundation for more ambitious patterns. Track this action visually, creating a feedback loop that makes your consistency tangible and reinforcing. How to take back your time and focus. In an age of unprecedented distraction, your ability to focus has become your scarcest and most valuable resource. While time remains fixed at 24 hours daily, the quality of those hours determined by your focus varies dramatically. The modern environment, engineered specifically to fragment attention, ensures that those who cannot protect their focus inevitably surrender their most valuable asset. Cyrus McCormick demonstrated this transformative power of protected focus during the 1830s. Born in 1809, McCormick didn't invent the mechanical reaper amid constant interruption. Instead, he created dedicated periods of uninterrupted thought and experimentation in his Virginia workshop. While others scattered their efforts across multiple potential innovations, McCormick maintained relentless focus on solving one significant problem: how to mechanize grain harvesting. This singular focus allowed him to perfect the reaper that revolutionized agriculture, ultimately increasing food production capabilities worldwide. McCormick's innovation didn't emerge from superior intelligence, but from superior attention allocation, the willingness to direct his cognitive resources toward one consequential challenge rather than dispersing them across many. Reclaiming your focus begins with recognizing its true value. Most people substantially underestimate the cost of interrupted attention. Research reveals that after a distraction, it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully return to a deeply focused state. Implement a focus reclamation strategy, beginning with environmental redesign. Create a dedicated workspace that signals to your brain that serious attention is expected. Schedule focus blocks of at least 90 minutes, the minimum time required for meaningful cognitive momentum. Protect these periods with the same seriousness you would give to critical meetings. The language matters here. You aren't finding time for focus, you're allocating your most valuable resource toward your highest priorities. Develop a distraction response to protocol for inevitable interruptions. Rather than immediately surrendering your attention, briefly note the distraction and promise yourself a specific time to address it later. This capture and defer approach prevents the distraction from consuming mental bandwidth while ensuring important matters aren't overlooked. Perhaps most importantly, train your attention capacity systematically. Focus, like physical strength, deteriorates without consistent exercise. Begin with sessions matched to your current capacity, perhaps just 25 minutes initially, and gradually extend them as your mental endurance increases. Track your focus metrics as diligently as any business tracks financial performance. How many hours of genuine deep focus did you achieve today? What percentage of your workday was spent in a truly attentive state? These measurements create accountability for this otherwise invisible asset. Why waiting is the enemy of greatness. The most persistent delusion in human psychology is the belief that the perfect moment awaits just beyond the horizon. This waiting mindset, the conviction that conditions will somehow align more favorably in some imagined future, becomes the unacknowledged architect of unfulfilled potential. It transforms temporary pauses into permanent stagnation, while maintaining the comforting illusion that great achievements remain possible. This waiting paralysis stems from a fundamental misconception about how greatness emerges. We imagine it requires ideal circumstances, abundant resources, complete information, perfect timing, maximum confidence. History reveals the opposite. Greatness consistently emerges from those who act decisively amid imperfect, often actively hostile conditions. Andrew Mellon embodied this counterweighting philosophy throughout his remarkable career. Born in 1855, Mellon built one of America's greatest fortunes not by waiting for economic certainty, but by acting during periods of maximum uncertainty. When others retreated during financial panics, Mellon advanced. When conventional wisdom counseled caution, Mellon moved decisively. His approach to building Alcoa exemplifies this anti-waiting mindset. When aluminum production was considered prohibitively expensive, Mellon invested heavily before the manufacturing challenges were fully solved. While others waited for proven markets, Mellon created them. His banking activities followed similar patterns, extending credit during tight markets when others withdrew, identifying opportunities others deemed premature. Mellon's billions weren't accumulated through superior market timing, but through the willingness to act while others waited. The waiting mindset creates a particularly destructive form of opportunity blindness. While you wait for ideal conditions for your primary goal, adjacent opportunities, often more valuable than your original objective, pass unnoticed. This happens because waiting isn't merely physical inaction, but a psychological state that narrows perception. The waiting mind focuses exclusively on specific trigger conditions, rather than remaining receptive to unexpected possibilities. Mellon's greatest acquisitions often weren't targets he initially sought, but opportunities he recognized while actively engaged in the market. Breaking the waiting habit begins with recognizing its fundamental deception. Perfect conditions don't arrive, they're created through action. The entrepreneur waiting for ideal market validation before launching discovers that such validation only emerges after they've begun. The writer waiting for inspiration learns that creative momentum generates inspiration rather than following it. Create accountability structures that make waiting more uncomfortable than acting. Public commitments, financial stakes, or partnerships that depend on your forward movement establish consequences for delay that override the comfort of waiting. Implement a worst-case analysis on waiting decisions. When tempted to delay, explicitly calculate the maximum potential downside of immediate action versus continued waiting. This analysis typically reveals that the risks of action are far more manageable than imagined, while the costs of waiting are substantially greater than acknowledged. Perhaps most effective is adopting ready enough as your action threshold. Determine the minimum viable preparation that makes action possible, then commit to moving forward once this threshold is reached. This prevents the endless pursuit of additional readiness that characterizes chronic waiting. How to create your own deadlines. The distance between intention and accomplishment is bridged by a single powerful tool, the deadline. Public commitments, financial stakes, or partnerships that depend on your forward movement establish consequences for delay that override the comfort of waiting. Implement a worst-case analysis on waiting decisions. When tempted to delay, explicitly calculate the maximum potential downside of immediate action versus continued waiting. This analysis typically reveals that the risks of action are far more manageable than imagined, while the costs of waiting are substantially greater than acknowledged. Perhaps most effective is adopting ready enough as your action threshold. Determine the minimum viable preparation that makes action possible, then commit to moving forward once this threshold is reached. This prevents the endless pursuit of additional readiness that characterizes chronic waiting. How to create your own deadlines. The distance between intention and accomplishment is bridged by a single powerful tool, the deadline. Without this temporal boundary, even the most passionate ambitions remain perpetually in progress, victims of the human tendency toward endless preparation and perfection seeking. Deadlines transform the abstract into the concrete, converting vague aspirations into time-bound commitments that demand specific action. Their power lies not in the arbitrary date itself, but in how they fundamentally alter your relationship with a project by creating urgency, focusing attention, and demanding resolution. Joseph Pulitzer understood this transformative power when building his newspaper empire in the late 19th century. Born in 1847, Pulitzer revolutionized journalism not merely through editorial innovation, but through relentless deadline discipline. In an industry where timeliness determined relevance, Pulitzer established unmovable deadlines throughout his organization. From reporters gathering stories to editors finalizing copy to presses beginning production. This deadline-driven culture created his competitive advantage. While competitors debated whether stories were perfect or complete, Pulitzer's newspapers were already reaching readers. His success demonstrated that meeting good deadlines consistently outperforms perfecting content indefinitely. The newspaper that reaches readers with 90% of the story today invariably outperforms the publication delivering 100% tomorrow. This same principle applies beyond journalism to any endeavor where completion creates value. The business launched imperfectly today can begin generating revenue and feedback immediately, while the perpetually planned perfect business remains theoretically superior but practically worthless. Creating effective personal deadlines begins with understanding their psychological mechanics. Self-imposed deadlines lack the external consequences of those set by others, making them vulnerable to renegotiation. Counteract this by artificially manufacturing consequences that make deadline adherence more comfortable than extension. Share your deadlines publicly with people whose opinions you value, triggering the powerful social commitment effect. Research shows that public commitments are significantly more likely to be fulfilled than private ones due to our natural aversion to inconsistency in others' eyes. Implement financial stakes by pre-committing money that becomes either a reward for meeting your deadline or a penalty for missing it. How a simple shift in mindset destroys procrastination. Procrastination persists not primarily as a time management issue, but as a mental framework, a specific way of relating to tasks, discomfort, and the future. This explains why traditional productivity tactics often fail. They address the symptoms rather than the underlying mindset generating the behavior. The crucial distinction between those who procrastinate chronically and those who act promptly isn't found in their schedules, willpower reserves, or organizational systems. It lies in their fundamental assumptions about work, capability, comfort, and purpose. When these assumptions shift, behavior transforms naturally without requiring the exhausting self-coercion typical of temporary productivity improvements. Henry Flagler's extraordinary transformation exemplifies this mindset shift's power. Born in 1830, Flagler initially achieved success as John D. Rockefeller's partner in Standard Oil, accumulating wealth that would satisfy most ambitions. Yet at 60 years old, an age when most contemplated retirement, Flagler underwent a profound mental reframing that unleashed unprecedented achievement. Visiting Florida for his wife's health, Flagler perceived possibilities others missed. He didn't merely see undeveloped coastline, he envisioned an American Riviera. This required shifting from seeing himself as a successful businessman completing his career to a visionary empire builder just beginning his most significant work. This mindset shift demolished the procrastination that typically accompanies late career comfort. Over the next 3 decades, Flagler constructed luxury hotels, established entire cities, and built the seemingly impossible Florida East Coast Railway extension to Key West, an engineering marvel crossing 156 miles of ocean. His achievements weren't products of superior resources, but of a transformed mental framework that rendered procrastination incompatible with his self-concept. The procrastination-destroying mindset shift begins with recognizing that procrastination itself represents a particular frame for interpreting tasks as burdens to be avoided rather than opportunities to be seized. This interpretation isn't objective reality, but a constructed perspective that can be deliberately reconstructed. Start by examining the language surrounding your procrastinated task. Notice phrases like have to, should, need to, all implying external imposition rather than chosen engagement. Deliberately replace these with choose to, get to, want to. This subtle linguistic shift acknowledges your agency and reframes obligations as opportunities. Next, challenge the perfectionistic thinking that fuels procrastination. The procrastination mindset assumes work must be flawless or comprehensive to have value. The action mindset recognizes that imperfect action creates more value than perfect planning. Make good enough to start your standard rather than good enough to finish. Perhaps most powerful is shifting from outcome orientation to process orientation. Procrastination thrives when focus remains exclusively on end results, making starting feel overwhelming. The action mindset finds intrinsic value in the process itself. the learning, growth, and engagement that occur regardless of outcome. Implement identity-based motivation by asking not, "What should I do?" but "Who am I becoming?" Flager didn't merely build hotels, he became Florida's developer. This identity-based framing makes consistent action a matter of integrity rather than discipline. You act not because you should, but because that's who you are. Practical implementation begins with small, deliberate mindset interventions preceding procrastinated tasks. Before beginning, explicitly name the limiting mindset and consciously adopt the empowering. With repetition, the new framework becomes increasingly automatic. How action beats perfection every time. The pursuit of perfection has silently sabotaged more dreams than any external obstacle ever could. This seemingly virtuous standard, the flawless execution, the ideal timing, the complete preparation, becomes the invisible barrier between intention and achievement. While perfectionism masquerades as quality control, its true function is often risk avoidance disguised as excellence. Action, even imperfect action, generates momentum that perfectionism perpetually postpones. This fundamental truth explains why those who act imperfectly but consistently outperform those who plan perfectly but intermittently. The perfection seeker remains perpetually in preparation mode, while the action taker gains experience, feedback, and results that accelerate progress exponentially. Richard Arkwright embodied this action-oriented approach during the early Industrial Revolution. Born in 1732 to humble beginnings, Arkwright lacked formal education and technical training when he began developing spinning machinery. His early spinning frame designs were decidedly imperfect, inefficient, prone to breakdowns, and constantly requiring modification. Had Arkwright waited until his designs achieved theoretical perfection, the mechanized textile industry might have emerged decades later. Instead, he deployed imperfect machines, observed their operation, gathered feedback, and implemented continuous improvement. This iterative approach allowed him to establish the world's first water-powered cotton spinning mill in 1771, transforming textile production from cottage industry to industrial powerhouse. Arkwright's fortune, eventually making him one of England's wealthiest individuals, didn't emerge from superior intellect or resources, but from his willingness to act while others theorized. His competitors often possessed more technical knowledge, but remained trapped in endless refinement cycles, while Arkwright's imperfect but budget-moding mills generated both revenue and practical insights unavailable to those who never moved beyond planning. The action over perfection principle operates through several mechanisms. First, action creates feedback that planning cannot. Only by implementing ideas can you identify their actual rather than theoretical weaknesses. Second, action builds momentum that overcomes initial resistance. Third, action develops capabilities that preparation alone cannot cultivate. Modern research confirms what Arkwright demonstrated intuitively. Studies on skill acquisition consistently show that practitioners who produce larger volumes of work, even with variable quality, ultimately outperform those who meticulously perfect fewer pieces. The ceramics students who made 50 pots learned more than those who crafted 5 perfect ones. Implementing the action beats perfection principle begins with calibrating standards appropriately for each project phase. Early stages require good enough to test rather than good enough to launch. This lower threshold removes the paralyzing pressure of premature perfection while maintaining progress. Next, establish minimum viable action thresholds, the smallest step that moves a project forward. For writing, it might be 50 words. For business, making 1 sales call. For fitness, 5 minutes of exercise. These micro-accessions bypass the overwhelming sensation that fuels perfectionist delay. Perhaps most importantly, redefine success from flawless execution to valuable learning. This perspective shift transforms imperfection from failure to essential feedback, making action not merely acceptable, but necessary for progress. Create artificial deadlines that force imperfect action. When the graphic designer has 4 hours rather than 4 weeks, perfectionism becomes impossible. Yet the work produced typically meets functional requirements despite its imperfections. These constraints reveal how much perfectionism serves psychological rather than practical needs. How one decision can change your entire life, life's trajectory rarely shifts through gradual evolution. Instead, fundamental transformation typically occurs at specific decision points. Moments when choosing one path over another creates cascading consequences that permanently alter your direction. These pivotal decisions function as switches on life's railroad tracks, directing your journey toward destinations that would otherwise remain forever inaccessible. This nonlinear relationship between decisions and outcomes explains why seemingly small choices often yield disproportionate results. A single decision to relocate, pursue education, start a business, or end a relationship can create butterfly effects that reverberate through decades. Understanding this amplification effect transforms decision-making from routine administration to perhaps life's most consequential skill. John Wanamaker's remarkable journey illustrates this decision point principle in action. Born in 1838 to modest circumstances, Wanamaker made a series of pivotal decisions that transformed both his life and American retail. His first crucial decision came at 23, when he left secure employment to open a small clothing store in Philadelphia, despite having minimal capital and facing significant economic uncertainty following the Civil War. This initial decision, choosing entrepreneurial risk over employment security, altered his entire life trajectory. Had Wanamaker decided differently, perhaps seeking promotion within existing structures, American retail history would have unfolded differently. Instead, his decision created the foundation for what became America's first department store. Wanamaker's second transformative decision came when he purchased an abandoned railroad freight depot for his expanded store, a counterintuitive choice ridiculed by contemporaries. This decision to establish a single large store with fixed prices, money-back guarantees, and unprecedented amenities directly challenged every retail convention of his era. The success flowing from these decisions ultimately made Wanamaker one of America's wealthiest individuals, pioneer of modern advertising, and Postmaster General of the United States. His life demonstrates how specific decision points function as gateways to entirely new paths previously invisible or inaccessible. The science behind decision-induced transformation involves several mechanisms. Neurologically, decisions create commitment that redirects cognitive resources from deliberation to implementation. Psychologically, decisions establish identity, reinforcing feedback loops that make subsequent aligned choices increasingly natural. Practically, decisions eliminate alternatives, focusing energy previously dispersed across multiple possibilities. Harnessing this transformative power begins with identifying high-leverage decision points, those with asymmetric upside relative to downside. These typically involve skills, relationships, habits, or investments where initial choices compound over time. A decision to learn programming, invest consistently, build a network, or adopt a keystone habit creates returns far exceeding the initial investment. Implement decision quality protocols for these high-leverage choices. Rather than making significant decisions reactively or emotionally, create deliberate space for weighing options, considering long-term implications, and examining alignment with core values. This doesn't require overthinking, but rather ensuring the decision emerges from clear priorities rather than temporary circumstances. Perhaps most important is developing decisive closure, the ability to fully commit after deciding. This means establishing concrete next actions that begin immediately following the decision, creating momentum that prevents the paralysis of second guessing. Wanamaker didn't merely decide to open a store. He immediately secured location, inventory, and financing, making reversal increasingly difficult with each implementation step. The person you become 5 years from now will be determined largely by the handful of significant decisions you make today. Choose wisely, commit fully, and remember that the most dangerous decision is allowing key choices to be made by default rather than design. How mental mastery ends the cycle of procrastination. Procrastination exists not primarily as a time management problem, but as a mind management failure. This distinction explains why traditional productivity tactics, schedules, reminders, and organizational systems often provide only temporary relief. Until you address the mental patterns generating procrastination, external solutions merely treat symptoms, while the underlying cognitive dysfunction continues unabated. The procrastinating mind operates through predictable patterns. It magnifies the discomfort of beginning, downplays the consequences of delay, and overestimates future willpower. These aren't character flaws, but automatic mental processes that, left unmanaged, consistently sabotage intentional action. Andrew Carnegie's transformation from impoverished immigrant to industrial titan demonstrates the decisive advantage of mental mastery. Born in 1835 to destitute Scottish weavers, Carnegie arrived in America at 13, facing poverty, minimal education, and no connections. What separated him from countless others in similar circumstances wasn't initial advantage, but superior mental discipline. Carnegie systematically trained his mind against procrastination's common triggers. When opportunity appeared in the growing telegraph industry, he didn't delay despite his youth and inexperience. While others hesitated during the emerging railroad boom, Carnegie moved decisively. When the nascent steel industry showed promise, he redirected his resources without the paralysis of overthinking. His mental mastery manifested most clearly in his ability to begin difficult tasks immediately rather than delaying. Carnegie's personal writings reveal his understanding that the first hour is the rudder of the day. He developed routines that ensured his mind engaged with priority work before distractions could derail intention. A 19th century application of what modern psychology calls strategic automaticity. Recent neuroscience validates Carnegie's intuitive approach. Brain imaging reveals that procrastination activates the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, when contemplating challenging tasks. This triggers the limbic system to seek immediate relief through delay. Mental mastery develops the prefrontal cortex's ability to override this automatic avoidance response, not through willpower, but through deliberate cognitive restructuring. Developing this mental discipline begins with meta-awareness, observing your thoughts without identifying with them. When procrastination urges arise, create psychological distance by labeling them objectively. I notice I'm having the thought that I should check emails before starting this project. This simple reframing interrupts automatic response patterns and creates space for conscious choice. Mental mastery ultimately requires aligning your identity with action rather than delay. Carnegie didn't merely do productive things, he saw himself fundamentally as someone who acted decisively. This identity-based motivation creates intrinsic drive that makes procrastination increasingly incongruent with your self-concept. The master of the mind becomes the master of achievement. Why action builds more action? The most persistent misconception about motivation is that it precedes action. that you must feel motivated before beginning. This assumption creates a perpetual waiting game as you delay engagement until inspiration arrives. The psychological reality is precisely opposite. Meaningful action creates motivation rather than following it. This inverted relationship explains why beginning is always hardest, yet momentum becomes self-sustaining once established. This counterintuitive principle operates through multiple reinforcing mechanisms. Neurologically, action triggers dopamine release that increases focus and drive. Psychologically, progress satisfies the fundamental human need for competence, creating positive emotions that encourage continued engagement. Practically, action generates clarity about next steps, eliminating the paralysis of uncertainty that frequently underlies procrastination. Few historical figures better exemplify this action generates momentum principle than J.P. Morgan. Born in 1837, Morgan built a financial empire not through sudden inspiration, but through cascading actions that each created momentum for subsequent achievements. The pattern began early. His initial banking experience led to partnership opportunities that might never have materialized without his entry-level engagement. Morgan's expansion from banking into railroads, then steel, electricity, and other industries, demonstrates how action in one domain creates unexpected opportunities in others. His initial work restructuring troubled railroads provided insights and connections that later facilitated his pivotal role in creating General Electric and U.S. Steel. Had Morgan waited for comprehensive understanding of these industries before engaging, most opportunities would have vanished before his preparation completed. His handling of the Panic of 1907 most dramatically illustrates how prior action builds capacity for subsequent achievements. Morgan's decades of accumulated banking actions, relationships established, deals structured, crises navigated, created the knowledge and authority that enabled him to coordinate the financial response that prevented economic collapse. This decisive intervention wasn't possible for those who had spent years contemplating banking rather than actively participating. Modern behavioral science has codified what Morgan demonstrated intuitively. Psychologists identify this as success spirals, achievement sequences, where small initial wins create confidence and capability that enable increasingly substantial accomplishments. These spirals operate through both internal mechanisms and external pathways. Implementing this principle begins with systematically lowering initial activation thresholds. Define starting actions so modest they bypass the brain's resistance mechanisms. Writing one paragraph rather than an entire report. Making one sales call rather than 10. Exercising for 5 minutes rather than an hour. These micro-accessions circumvent the overwhelm that prevents initiation. Next, establish immediate feedback mechanisms that make progress visible. The motivational power of action depends partly on recognizing movement, yet many significant projects provide only delayed or ambiguous feedback. Create artificial progress markers, tracking words written, calls completed, or problems solved that provide concrete evidence of advancement even before external results materialize. Perhaps most important is implementing action triggers that eliminate the decision-making that often derails momentum. These environmental cues automatically initiate behavior chains without requiring conscious deliberation. The notebook opened at breakfast that triggers writing, the running shoes placed by the bed that initiate exercise, the client list prepared the previous evening that launches calls immediately upon arriving at work. The momentum you seek doesn't exist before action, it emerges from it. The choice isn't between acting with momentum or without it, but between creating momentum through action or remaining stationary while awaiting motivation that never arrives independently. Your next action, however small, contains within it the seed of all future achievements. How time punishes the hesitant time moves with perfect democracy, allocating exactly 24 hours daily to every human alive. yet with absolute indifference to how those hours are used. This impartiality creates an unforgiving arithmetic. While everyone receives identical time allotments, the rewards for how that time is invested vary dramatically. In this equation, hesitation extracts perhaps the highest cost of all. The penalty for hesitation isn't merely delay, but permanent opportunity loss. Markets evolve, circumstances shift, and competitive positions are secured while the hesitant remain in deliberation. This explains why seemingly identical starting points produce radically different outcomes over time. The decisive gain compounding advantages that the hesitant can never recover. Cornelius Vanderbilt epitomized this principle throughout his remarkable rise from Staten Island ferry operator to railroad magnate. Born in 1794 with no inherited wealth or connections, Vanderbilt built America's largest fortune through decisiveness when opportunities appeared. When steamboat technology emerged, Vanderbilt immediately shifted from sailing vessels. Despite having mastered the previous approach, when railroads began supplanting water transportation, he pivoted decisively again, reallocating resources while competitors remained committed to existing models. Vanderbilt's defining characteristic wasn't superior intelligence or privileged information, but his capacity for immediate action when opportunity appeared. During the California Gold Rush, while others debated the best approach, Vanderbilt quickly established steamship service via Nicaragua, creating a competitive advantage others couldn't overcome once established. His purchase of the struggling New York and Harlem Railroad demonstrated similar timing advantage, acquiring assets at favorable terms while others hesitated. The time hesitation penalty operates through several mechanisms. First, opportunity windows close permanently or conditions deteriorate while the hesitant deliberate. Second, decisive competitors secure advantageous positions that become increasingly difficult to displace. Third, the hesitant lose invaluable feedback that would guide subsequent decisions, creating compounding disadvantages even when they finally act. Modern markets amplify these penalties. Technology compresses opportunity cycles from years to months or even weeks. Globalization ensures someone somewhere will act on opportunities you identify but hesitate to pursue. Digital networks allow advantages to scale rapidly, creating winner-take-most dynamics that punish delayed entry exponentially. Overcoming hesitation begins with recognizing its true cost, not merely postponed success, but potentially permanent opportunity loss. Implement decision thresholds that trigger automatic action when sufficient information exists. Vanderbilt didn't wait for certainty, but moved decisively when directional clarity emerged. Create accountability structures that make hesitation more uncomfortable than action. Public commitments, financial stakes, or partnerships that depend on your movement establish consequences for delay that override the temporary comfort of postponement. Perhaps most importantly, develop rapid prototyping approaches for testing opportunities rather than extensive pre-action analysis. Small, quick experiments provide more valuable information than prolonged theoretical evaluation while preserving the timing advantage critical to success. Ask yourself today, what opportunity currently before me will likely disappear or deteriorate if I don't act promptly? What competitive advantage, if secured now, would become exponentially more valuable over time? What knowledge or feedback, available only through action, would immediately improve my subsequent decisions? How to design a life free from procrastination. Procrastination persists not through lack of productivity techniques, but through the absence of intentional design. Most attempt to overcome procrastination within environments specifically engineered to foster it, surrounded by distractions, lacking clear priorities, and operating without structural accountability. This explains why willpower-based approaches inevitably fail. Even extraordinary determination cannot overcome fundamentally flawed systems. The solution isn't found in greater effort within broken systems, but in designing environments, routines, and mindsets where procrastination becomes harder than productive action. This systematic approach transforms procrastination from a character battle to an engineering problem, one solved through deliberate design rather than perpetual struggle. Henry Leland embodied this design-based approach throughout his extraordinary career. Born in 1843, Leland established manufacturing standards that transformed American industry while founding both Cadillac and Lincoln Motor Company. His success stemmed not from sporadic inspiration, but from meticulously designed systems that ensured consistent execution regardless of momentary motivation. Leland's manufacturing facilities reflected his understanding that environment determines behavior. He arranged workspaces to eliminate unnecessary movement, designed specialized tools that standardized quality, and implemented inspection systems that created immediate accountability. These design elements didn't merely improve efficiency, they made precision manufacturing inevitable rather than optional. His personal routines demonstrated equal intentionality. Leland began each day reviewing precisely defined priorities, conducted inspections at consistent intervals, and maintained systematic documentation that created continuity between days. This wasn't merely discipline, but environmental design that made procrastination more difficult than progress. Design decision architecture that minimizes resistance points where procrastination typically begins. Predetermine what you'll work on each day, eliminating the paralysis of choice that frequently precedes delay. Standardize starting routines that bypass the initiation resistance that derails most productive intentions before they begin. Perhaps most powerful is designing social architecture that makes procrastination socially expensive. Create regular accountability to others with specific deliverables and deadlines. This transforms procrastination from a private delay with minimal immediate consequences to a public commitment with tangible social costs. Implement progressive systems that adapt as procrastination evolves. Like security systems requiring updates against new threats, anti-procrastination designs require ongoing refinement as your mind develops countermeasures against initial constraints. Regularly audit where procrastination currently manifests and adjust systems accordingly. Create metrics that make progress visible while procrastination becomes transparent. Tracking systems convert ambiguous working on it dates into concrete progress measurements that immediately reveal when procrastination has taken hold, eliminating the self-deception that often accompanies delay. Procrastination persists not because you lack discipline, but because your current systems make it easier than progress. Design different systems and different results become inevitable, while you must act now or forever be chained. Each moment of delay forges another link in the chain of procrastination, a restraint that begins almost imperceptibly but gradually immobilizes your potential. This progressive bondage explains why what starts as temporary postponement so often transforms into permanent limitation. The chain strengthens through a devastating formula. Each delay diminishes motivation, while simultaneously making the delayed task appear more daunting. This self-reinforcing cycle creates a psychological prison more confining than any physical constraint. While external obstacles can often be overcome through determined effort, the mental barriers erected by persistent procrastination become increasingly insurmountable. The truth hidden within this process is both sobering and liberating. The chains binding you were self-regurgitated, and only decisive action can break them. James J. Hill's extraordinary rise from humble clerk to railroad empire builder demonstrates the transformative power of breaking these invisible restraints. Born in 1838, and losing sight in one eye at age 9, Hill faced circumstances that would have justified delay or diminished ambition in many. Instead, he recognized that immediate action, however modest, was the only path to eventual achievement. When Hill identified the potential of developing rail connections between St. Paul and the Pacific Northwest, he didn't wait for ideal conditions. Despite limited capital, fierce competition, and technical challenges crossing the northern wilderness, Hill began immediately with available resources. His Great Northern Railway, built without government subsidies when most deemed it impossible, stands as testament to the freedom that exists beyond procrastination's chains. The most insidious aspect of procrastination's bondage is how it distorts perception. Tasks delayed grow monstrous in imagination. Opportunities postponed seem increasingly remote. Potential unrealized appears increasingly unrealizable. This perceptual distortion explains why breaking free requires immediate action rather than additional contemplation. The chains themselves prevent accurate assessment. Liberation begins with a single decisive act that shatters the pattern. This isn't primarily about completing a specific task, but about reclaiming agency through movement. The particular action matters less than the psychological breakthrough it creates, the lived experience that the chains can indeed be broken. It's time to stop waiting and start doing. Procrastination has stolen enough of your time, your dreams, and your potential. The moment you decide to take action is the moment you reclaim control. Say goodbye to excuses, embrace discipline, and watch your life transform. Act now and own your future.